Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Hertig. I'm the co-executive director for CalECSE. And on behalf of our CalECSE network, we wanted to thank you for attending our training today. We're happy to host our great partners with Desired Results Access Project. We have Elizabeth Schroeder and we have Shawn Kaplan here today, who are going to share a bit with us. Beyond compliance is our thing in regards to working with the DRDP as a tool in our preschool setting. So we're going to hear all the wonderful ways that we can use the DRDP to better inform our practices, goal writing, all the things, parent communication, all the wonderful things. So if this is your first CalECSE training, we want to welcome you and invite you to our training calendar on the CalECSE website, calexse.org. We probably will be populating the 25-26 calendar around the month of August, and we'll have the calendar planned really for the whole year. So be looking forward to that information. CalECSE is a technical assistance project funded by the California Department of Education, focused on improving practices for practitioners as well as outcomes for our preschool children who receive special education services. During the training, if you've got any specific questions, go ahead and put those into the chat and we'll be monitoring the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, we should have some time for some more open questions and following up on those questions related to the chat. Desired Results Project will also have a survey for you all as well. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Elizabeth Schroeder and Shawn Kaplan.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Welcome in, everybody. Elizabeth Schroeder and I are here to support you and provide this information. I'll be walking us through the slides, and Elizabeth is going to have her expertise ready to go for any questions that you have in the chat box. I am the training manager at Desired Results Access Project, and Elizabeth is the director. So we're happy to be partnering with CalECSE and glad that you've taken time out of probably the 1 hour you have to recharge to be here with us today. So without any further ado, we will jump right in. Our agenda here on the screen, we're going to take a look at the overview for DRDP, really going beyond compliance, but we want to make sure that you have a solid understanding about why the DRDP. And we're going to talk about data collection, reports, and then linking the DRDP to curriculum and foundations and IEPs and all those great things that you're spending time doing. We'll look at those practical uses. Along the way, I will invite all of you to drop some thoughts and responses into the chat box, as well as any questions that you come up with. And then, as Melanie said, at the end, we'll leave some space and time for questions and answers. So at the end of our hour, our hope is that you walk away with an understanding of the why behind the DRDP, really understanding the importance of it and why it is that we're utilizing the DRDP. Understand how to effectively collect data, all the different avenues in which you can gather data, understand how to run reports, and then also understand how effective DRDP data can support your work. We're going to start with the why behind the DRDP. So this is where we'll share some of those fundamental reasons that the DRDP is required, as well as the impact of those requirements. So as you ask yourself, why collect DRDP data? There is a requirement. The Office of Special Education Program requires that all children with an IFSP or an IEP from birth to 5 receiving special education services from an LEA, they have a DRDP completed twice a year, spring and fall. So that is one requirement. Also, public accountability. It allows continued funding when we're able to maintain accountability, then folks want to continue to fund important work. So when DRDPs are completed consistently, timely, and accurately, it tells the public this is a really good use of funds and more inclined to continue to fund the efforts and the work. And then as we look at children and families and what they deserve in terms of high quality and effective services, when DRDP assessments are completed with intentionality, it really does provide one, objective data that lets us know what services are working and any potential gaps that can be closed. So ensuring that there is some high quality care being provided and parents are understanding what that looks like. And then as we look at program improvement, educators and children are also in a space to deserve supportive learning environments, both on the child side and your side as an educator. And we can use these outcomes, all of this data that is collected via this authentic assessment tool to really show what resources and supports are needed, what resources and supports are working to help support you as educators and ultimately then pass that support down to the children. We want you to be able to do your job effectively as well as support children in their development. And finally, if that was not enough, instructional planning. So the practical use of gathering all of that data leads to opportunity to support you in your instructional planning. When you have the data and you understand how children are progressing in their development, how they're developing in different areas, then you can begin to make those informed and supportive decisions for how you're planning instruction. What are those learning opportunities that you're providing in the classroom for children based on the data that shows you what they're needing those supports in? So ultimately, what that means is that using the DRDP data to really understand what measures children are progressing in, what measures children are needing additional support in, makes your job ideally a little bit easier. You'll be hitting those targets of supports by allowing the data to inform your practice. So we're going to take some time to look a little more closely at that data, at the reports, and give you an idea of how you can use that as we move through. So let's talk a little bit about data collection. We're going to look at a variety of ways to collect data. And this is where I'd love to have you all drop some thoughts, reflections, and even questions in the chat box around data collection. All of this data is what we're wanting to support you using in informing your instruction. So on the slide here, we have two different tiers, essentially, not really tiers. One is not more important than the other, but the top row looking at other service providers, general education staff, and families. So those are the people, right? Those are the humans and live pulse of data collection avenues. And then on the bottom row, we've got more of the logistical stuff, right? The observations, the work samples, the videos, and the photos. We're going to take a closer look at each one of these, and I'm going to ask you to join us in a little bit of chat box brainstorming on ways to incorporate these different avenues into your assessment process. Okay, so really be thinking about how each one of these categories as we move through them provides perspective for you to be able to complete the assessment. Thinking about, again, the DRDP as an authentic assessment tool, really leaning in and asking us to make sure that we're collecting all the way around 360 view of the child from all of these different aspects. So let's start off with data collection from other service providers. This is just a beginning list of ideas to get you thinking about who would other service providers possibly be. So speech and language pathologists, physical therapists, special education teachers, or early intervention specialists. You might think of somebody else who you would drop on this list. If you do, drop them in the chat box. And then I'd also love to hear, in the chat box, if you will, yeah, we're a large group. What might other service providers observe that would support you in completing the assessment? So why is it that other service providers can add value and support to data collection? Give you a moment to sort of think about that. Collaboration is going to come up big. And Elizabeth, if you're watching in that chat box, if there's anything you want to call out that's being dropped in there, please do so.
Lots of OTs, collaboration.
Okay. Yep. Other
Special education assistants. Mm-hmm.
And then as you think about all of those different roles, what are some of the things that they might be observing that would be important information for you in completing the assessment? What could they offer from their lens? Some understanding of why are behind behaviors. And great. Some of you have had positive experiences with speech and language pathologists being a great resource in the past. And if Melanie, you want to elaborate on like what was that support? What did that look like and sound like? Social, emotional. And then as we think about the actual measures within the DRDP tool, you might have one of these service providers be able to really speak to, for instance, LLD3 for expressive language, right? A speech and language pathologist might be able to give you a little more insight into how a child is developing along that. PD Health 2 for gross motor, for an early intervention specialist, looking at crawling and rolling over, walking, jumping, all of those kinds of things. SED2, understanding people's behaviors, feelings, and thoughts and characteristics. So as they're working in a specific way with a child, they're going to have a lens that might inform one measure or another in a little more detail. That's going to support you in collecting really authentic data. You'll be able to see how a child is progressing in some of those areas. Let's think about general education providers. Again, feel free, welcome. I love that there's so much coming into the chat box. It's rich for everybody to be able to follow along there. But how can a general education provider help gather information across these measures? And if you are sitting in one role or another, think about how you might also be able to contribute to. And any particular processes or ways that maybe a general education provider would be able to support the collection of data. Work samples, daily anecdotes, observations, photographs, absolutely. Work samples, they've got a large chunk of time with children, and so they're seeing things across a span of a day. All of those things, meals and snacks, outdoor time, areas in which children are engaging in different ways than they are when they're having another service provider interacting with them. Beautiful. So as you're thinking about these and dropping all of these into the chat, sometimes we know these things on that level, but then how are we transferring that into practice in order to help us complete our data collection and ultimately fill out the DRDP assessment? So if you're not able to, at this point, if you haven't been collaborating with general ed or other special service providers, now you have that support to go back and say, hey, I went to this training and let's see how I can gather some of your anecdotals and things like that to help support this process. Let's think about families. How could families support you in collecting data? What could they share? What skills might they see at home that you wouldn't be as likely to see in the education setting? Thoughts around those observations? Absolutely. Dressing themselves is a big one. Yeah. Dressing and hygiene, and those engaging in those hygiene routines might not be something that you'll see as frequently within the education setting. Absolutely. So in order to really gather enough data and have it be a true authentic assessment, you can see how important it is to collaborate with others, and especially families, and families included. They're going to see things that aren't going to be as prominently observed within the education setting. So really leaning into families and asking them what they are observing and noticing at home in those areas. Again, leaning into that real authentic assessment. And now if we think about observations for data collection, Let's think about ways that you can observe. Some of those things came into the chat box a little bit around what general education providers could contribute. But let's also think about times and formats in which you can gather observations. So small groups, indoors, outdoors, peer interactions, anything else coming to mind? Again, this is just a beginning list of things. So what else comes to mind in terms of opportunities, places, times of day, and formats in which you could gather some observational data? Mealtime for sure. Yeah. I love, and that you're thinking about how valuable families are as well.
So,
Outdoor and playtime. No time during the day is really off limits. How can you ensure that you're able to collect data during these times? What are some strategies, or how are you already collecting data, or how do you wish you could be collecting data wherever you are in your process? What are some of those strategies, processes, organizations, and tools that you could use to ensure that you're able to capture observational data during these times of day? Might it be with a camera, notepad, Post-it notes, pen and pockets? That's what those beautiful, lovely aprons are for, right? You got to have all your pockets and your pens right at your fingertips and disposal. Yeah. Any others? Even if you think that your system or process is simple, and I'm sure everybody knows it, not always. So even if you think it's something that's pretty common or traditional, I would encourage you to drop that in the chat box. You never know who's going to pick up on your idea and go, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? Device recordings. Technology has really changed the ways that we're able to do things. Recording and Learning Genie. So if you're using that, absolutely. Notebooks are great. Personally, I'm a big color-coded person. So if you've got tabs and color codes in a thicker notebook for different children, you can capture that all in one space, for instance. Getting some thumbs ups with some of the ideas there. So we're all able to learn from each other here, which is absolutely invaluable. Then we've looked at collaboration, other service providers, gen ed service providers, collaboration with the families, observations. Let's think about work samples. All different types of work samples can be collected. Again, I'd love to hear how you're currently collecting and organizing work samples, or how could you? Is it something that you know others have done and you wish, gosh, I wish I was doing that, or I wonder how I could be more efficient at that? Drop those into the chat box as well. This is a list of some examples of work samples. You might have other things. Taking pictures, using them. You can see in this image here on the slide, maybe you have a 3-ring binder that you collect per child. Maybe you're uploading those work samples right into Learning Genie. However, your process works for you. Electronic portfolios, again, we're leaning in heavily to technology, which is fabulous. Anything that makes your job a little bit easier and more organized, binders, photos, iPads, cameras, Learning Genie. What I will say, old school 3-ring binder, any type of way to organize. All right, excellent. We're going to do one more slide, and I'm going to pause for questions in case there's anything burning. We've seen in the chat box some photos, some video, and that technology coming into play. As we think about things that you might capture by measure in those videos or photographs. Again, starting a list here of you might be getting some video footage or photographs around peer work. So you can measure engaging with peers or working in centers, those kinds of documentation aspects. What measures could ultimately be informed through some of this data collection through video and photograph? Give you a moment to drop some thoughts around that. If you're thinking about where and when during the day could I get video and photograph around engaging with peers? And then what measure is that going to connect you to? Classification patterning. Some endless possibilities in some regard. But as we think about like SED4 for relationships and social interactions with peers, we know that we're capturing this. So as you start to move through intentionally on how and when you're collecting data, and you can see more clearly when I'm capturing videos or photographs or writing an anecdotal during center time or during peer engagement, I know that I'm collecting data that's related to or connected to these measures. It will help you gather information that will take you through the whole assessment. Sometimes it's easy to come up with and go, I'm not collecting enough data in this particular domain or around this particular measure. So as you start to think about the intentionality of where and how you're collecting that data aligned to those measures. What are some other ones that might come to mind for you? All of ALT reg. I do that too. I flip the T and the L's. Yeah, we've got a lot of possible opportunities. PD health, 2 and 3, gross motor movement and manipulation of things. And PD health 4, fine motor, right? For the ones that are here on the bullet. All right, I'm going to pause here. Any burning questions thus far before we take a look at reports? No? All right, I always say that means one of two things. This is spot on and making perfect sense, or we're not quite sure what questions we have just yet. Let's take a look at reports. So we've looked at collecting data. We've looked at all the different people who can be involved in helping to collect data so that it really is a full view picture of how the child is progressing. The next thing you're going to need to do is put all of that data in whatever platform you're using, right? Upload the assessment to the platform that your SELPA uses. And then you will be able to run reports. In DR Access reports, you do have to have an account in order to be able to generate those reports. And so we can actually drop a link in there so that you can quickly get to our website and create that account if you don't already have one. If you are able to, let us know in the chat box if you do, with a yes or a no, have a reports account or not. We'd love to get a pulse on who has accounts and who is needing accounts. So you definitely need an account in order to run those reports. You can create an account right here on our website. So if you don't already have one, please log in and create one. There'll be a little video tutorial up there to walk you through how to create a account with the reports. Very simple and straightforward. Please make sure that it is a good email in which you can receive information and it matches. If you are using SACE or Cyrus, that it matches for you. And those reports will upload automatically from SACE or Cyrus over to DR reports, DR Access reports. Okay. Once you've created an account, you're going to be able to run reports. Beautiful. I see only yeses so far for accounts. So that's fabulous. If at any time there's ever an issue, you can always reach out to us as well. Once you have your account, you'll be able to run reports. At the bottom of this screen, you can see the different types of reports that you can run. You can run a child report and you can run peer reports. There's 2 versions of each of those. You have a child status report and a child progress report, and same thing for a peer report. You have a peer status report and you have a peer progress report. So for whatever report you want, you'll click right on that hyperlink and it will take you to generate that report. The child report is going to show you ratings for one child for either one assessment period, or for the progress report across multiple 2 or more assessment periods. So Once you run your child report, you can use that to see progress over a period of time. That data can help inform IEP goals, IFSP outcomes. It can inform ongoing instruction, any interventions that need to be considered and decided upon. You'll be able to clearly see measures that are needing additional support and the levels in which you can support the skill development. And we're going to take a look at a report as well, and we'll look through how you can read that data. A peer report, again, you have two options. The peer report, though, is going to show a child's DRDP ratings compared to same age peers. And again, you can do that for one assessment period or two or more assessment periods to see how they're progressing and moving closer to same age peers. Okay. Those reports can be useful for, again, identifying what domains to prioritize. It might be parents are often interested in how is my child doing compared to classmates. So you can use objective confidential data there to share with families, planning for transitions, and collaborating with other educators. We're going to take a look at a report. We're going to start with the child report. And I'm actually going to shift a share so that you can see this a little bit larger and we can walk through it. You'll also get a copy of this child report so that you can take a deeper look at it. We can drop that in the chat box for you. So here you can see a child report for Angeline. This is all, changed information. Your first page is going to give you a quick snapshot at the domain level. So you're going to be able to see where is Angeline falling along this continuum. ATL reg, we can see building earlier at that domain level. Anything that is farther to that right side is the greater the development. The farther to the left is where you're going to be looking at where more support is needed. And this is going to be a quick snapshot at the domain level. Following your first page, it will break it down one domain at a time. And then you'll see the measures there along the continuum. Okay. It will also show you the current level of mastery for that child and what the next developmental level is. This is going to give you a lot of information for planning for instruction. It will follow that same process until you've moved through all of those domains. And that'll be your quick reference points. Now I'm going to go back to the top. Just looking at this at first glance, where would you determine Angeline is needing additional support? And you can drop that in the chat box. SED, one of the ones that's farthest to the left, right? There's more opportunity there for progression. Beautiful. And MPD health, almost in alignment, right, with SED. So you can see as you look at the first page of a child status report, this is the status report because it is one assessment period. Okay, beautiful. And now as you look at that, you could dig a little bit deeper, go down to SED and take a look at the specific measures there and figure out where do I want to lean in? What kinds of learning opportunities do I want to make sure that I'm offering? What kinds of more specific supports in this domain is Angeline going to benefit the most from? Okay. And then in those collaboration discussions, you can check in and see how Angeline might be doing with a service provider, or how is she doing at home in these areas, and help that guide your conversation and collaboration. Questions here before we look at a peer report? Beautiful. And so now hopefully you all can see a peer reference report up on the screen. Remember that the peer reference report is looking at how a child is doing alongside same age peers. Okay. So in this is Angeline again. You can see ATL reg here. And where is Angeline? You've got the months of development along the side. So where is she falling? You know, this vertical line is letting you know where she's falling. And based on age development, you can see it aligned right here along the side. So it'll give you a good idea of where she's falling depending on Angeline's age, which we can see here is 5 years and 1 month. Where is she falling in terms of same age peers? Broken down again by domain. Very similar, different information, right? Child status report is that child individually, the peer reference report giving you a snapshot and a look at how the child is doing compared to same age peers. Questions here?
Can we give a little bit more detail about the light blue versus the dark blue? And Deborah has a similar question. So do we have this?
Go ahead. Did you want another view?
I was just thinking,
I'm like, these are the two
want
that
to zoom in on just one of those bands and I can talk about it in a little bit more detail?
You sure can. Tell me if it's zoomed in enough, though.
It is, just could you scooch it to the right a titch?
I'm gonna try.
Okay,
No.
that's perfect. That's perfect. That's good.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, because I can see the language development. So good questions, Jenny and Deborah. So first of all, the band that the child's on is the blue band. So we'll take that first. We'll take the blue. If the child's domain rating, that blue line, is in the dark blue part, they are at age expectations. The light blue is they are close. The guidance, and I'll post a little link for those things when Shawn goes back to talking, but it's about 1.2 standard deviations from the mean is the at age expectations, and then it's 2 standard deviations below the mean that's close. And then if their domain rating is in the white part to the left, they are not at age expectations. So I think that answers both of your questions. What's the difference between the light and the dark? And Katrina has an interesting comment. I prefer the peer reference reports for transitions. Is there any reason? Like,
to me, they're kind of more similar to standardized testing data. If we're wanting to support our recommendations for, let's say, SDC versus Gen Ed, where they fall compared to peers is very relevant, versus in those bands of building and exploring, those aren't really, there's no indication of where they should fall, when they should be in exploring, when they should be building. So I think it's helpful to see where they should be when we're determining placement.
And should is an interesting word. So just want to make sure.
Fair enough.
Yeah. No, I know. It's like, it's so nuanced. It's really compared to their same age peers.
Exactly what I mean.
Yeah. So it just gives you a sense of where they're at. Jenny had another good.
If a child's been in like an autism class or significantly is having significant needs, a lot of times their parents, in my experience, when they get to the transition assessment, if that's their only child, they don't really have a vantage point of what other children are doing, and then seeing, oh, they're in building, that doesn't really mean anything to the parent. I think what's more informative is seeing sort of what same age peers are doing, because they don't have that vantage point at all.
That makes good sense.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question.
And you go ahead, and then I'll answer Jenny's question.
On the previous, child report, if I understand it correctly, there are certain domains where they kind of ceiling out before getting to the highest level, like the purple range. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Shawn, I don't know if it's possible for you to toggle to the child report.
It certainly is. That's exactly what I was just about to do.
The ATL reg domain does have some earlier developing measures. And it's ATL. So go up one more page, Shawn. Actually, other direction. It's hard to know on the computer what direction. There you go. There you go. So ATL reg happens to 1, 2, and 3 only go up to exploring later and building earlier. And you see how it notes it in the table at the bottom. There's no that those are the latest developmental levels. And so there are some measures that top out before integrating earlier.
I think that's maybe another reason I prefer the peer reference reports, because just at a glance, seeing that a child is nowhere near the purple kind of looks like there's a deficit, whereas maybe there's not. It's just because there's a ceiling there that they're not scoring closer to integrating. If that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it also makes sense. You know, I think it's also on the child report. I think one thing that might be helpful if you want to use the child report with families is to highlight that they hit the top.
Thank you. That is very helpful.
Yeah, and just say they're there. There's no other place, but I totally understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
So I'm so sorry. I just wanted to quickly add to Jenny's question back on the peer reference report. Sorry, Shawn.
No, go for it.
Okay, make you toggle back to the peer reference report. There was a question about the little black vertical line across the blue band, and that's the median. That's the median for that age range. So if the child is in the blue, they're at age expectations. If they're below the little black tick mark, they're not quite at the median for their age. And the median is the direct middle point. Okay, good question.
Yeah, great questions. All right, we're going to go back to PowerPoint, folks. And then we just did peer reference report. Now, what I'd love to do is have a discussion around reports. I am going to drop some questions into the chat box for you all to think about. And I'd love to have a discussion where you all can come off of mute, share thoughts. And oh, that looks kind of sloppy. And I don't like how this is reading in the chat box. I'm also going to say the questions, and oh, that just blurred when I hit enter. Well, that didn't work. All right.
Doesn't look too bad. Well, that image.
My side, it's just a smudge. All right. So here are the questions that I want you to think about. Based on Angeline's report, we did talk about what areas she shows strengths in, closest to age expectations. And Elizabeth, did we have a chance to drop her report in the chat box so folks can also open it? Because I can go back to it too. And I want you to think about how could you support continued progress in that area? What domain does Angeline need extra support in, right? And what is she showing close to age expectations, or where is she below age expectations? So as you think about how you could, what areas you could provide support in, I want you to think about what are some of those intentional opportunities that you could provide to support Angeline in that area of development. And if anyone is needing clarification on those questions, please feel free to come off mute and ask. We really want you to be thinking about, now that you see the data, you've been able to read the data and determine where Angeline is progressing more fluidly and where Angeline is needing a little extra support. What do you do with that information? How do you then transfer that information into your own practice in providing intentional opportunities in a way that can inform your instruction to continue supporting Angeline? And that's a lot to type, so feel free to come off of mute and share.
You could be spending time with her during interactions in free play or even small groups in supporting her interactions with her peers.
Absolutely. And then as you take that one step further and start to think about what does supporting look like and sound like in those moments, so that, I don't know if any of you are like me, but I can have the greatest ideas in the world, but if I don't think through what those details are and what that looks and sound like, can look and sound like, I'm going to be right there with her and those peers. And I'm going to wonder, like, did I actually support her today? Did I actually tap into those extra,
Well,
that
depending on
extra?
the lesson that you've set up, giving the children the language that they would, want to use during that time.
Beautiful. That specificity in your planning can make all the difference in the world, so that when you're in that moment, you have some very clear vision for how you're supporting a child in a particular area. It
Right,
will
and
get
some specific words that you would want to use.
even deeper, right? Getting even deeper. And then it supports you in that data collection. You know very intentionally where and when you're able to tune in for some observation, make some anecdotal notes that you can then utilize in order to complete the assessment down the line.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so hopefully that's like just sort of connecting that bridge, right, Melanie? Like, we're able to take these isolated aspects and then see how it all works together, ultimately at the end of the day, to support you all in the work that you do. We recognize you have a lot on your plate. What are some other specific things that you would plan for Angeline? And it might be helpful if I pop this slide back up so you all have that visual too. Any other thoughts?
Rebecca shared incorporating scripts or sentence starters through the classroom.
Beautiful. And even I wonder if I'll put this view back up. Even I wonder, with particular children in mind, you could even make a little note on those sentence strips or colored dots or whatever that reminds you that when this particular child is in this space or area, these are things that I really want to tap into.
That will help support staff as well, so that they're on the same page.
In a very subtle and clear fashion.
Yes.
Yeah. What else comes to mind? Looking at our domain level. Anything else come to mind?
Are you speaking in regard to different domains?
And yeah, whatever one jumps out at you, there's no right or wrong to
The other
highlight.
one, of course, was the PD health domain, supporting things just like helping a child learn how to pedal a bike, for instance, when you're out at an outdoor play. Giving them
Absolutely. And if we wanted to go
direct
look a little
instruction
bit,
about what that looks like.
absolutely. And if we wanted to dig a little bit deeper on PD Health, we can go and see right here. Here's where Angeline is currently. Here's the next level of development. So for instance, PD Health 1 tries different ways to coordinate movements of large or small body parts. So what is it? We want to help her get there. What are the things that we could do that would help support that next Angeline getting to that next level of development, meeting her right in that sweet spot of proximal development there, from current level to where you want her to go. Absolutely. And we do these things so naturally, right, in the environment. But when we've got a specific focus for a child, it becomes more intentional.
Well, hand over hand or hand over feet, like I was saying, actually physically moving them through emotion, but getting them where you want them to be.
Could be just that. Absolutely. Any others that folks would like to share?
Yeah, Deborah shared a couple things, the using helper hand language, but also pairing her with peers who enjoy and model more complex pretend play. Jenny shared planning gross motor activities through music and movement. And Deborah also had the idea of obstacle courses on the playground.
And that's fun for everyone.
Yeah, that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful.
Excuse me, I have a kind of obscure question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Sorry. I am a gen ed preschool teacher in a full inclusion classroom, and we use this for all of our students. And my question is, my students that are on an IEP just for speech that are gen ed kiddos, I still use the IEP version for their DRDP. So they have more measures that I need to answer for them. And my SPED teacher takes care of the SPED component for my SPED students. My question is, if we were to pull this all up, is it going to itemize them because we do it as a class? Will it separate out and rate only the students on for the IEP measure version on one, and then have students that didn't qualify for the IEP measures on a separate? Or am I going to have students that are on an IEP to show comparatively in our classroom where they land amongst a typically developing peer? And does that make sense what I'm asking?
Kind of. Christina, you're the gen ed teacher, right?
Correct.
So are you putting all of your data into DRDP Online?
We utilize Learning Genie. We're with Clovis Unified.
Okay, and so then that's transferring to DRDP Online. So you're doing that for all children with IEPs as well, right?
Right. So correct. Under my caseload, my SPED teacher, she takes over her the students that are on an IEP for because she's their case manager. So she'll input all their data, even though we collectively collect data, and then she has additional data in regard to their IEP goals and whatnot. So
Yes.
everybody kind of gets thrown in the pot together in like one class roster, since we are a full inclusion class. But then I have a few kiddos that are considered general ed students that also have an IEP just on our regular campus with mainstream speech. So
Yes.
they don't do I'm trying to remember which version we use of the DRDP, but it's not the full out one because not everybody has an IEP. And I'm just wondering though, if I were to look at it, because our data is pushed together, is it going to show like a child that's a typically developing 5-year-old that's ready to hit the ground running to go to kindergarten, and then also show our students that are on an IEP in the same light? Or will it section them out by the one that they were used for their rating scales?
So Christina, the reports, the individual child reports show where the child is at based on their assessment.
Correct.
It is not impacted by any data that's either loaded or not loaded. So you can produce child reports from DRDP Online for any and all your kids.
Right.
Kids with IEPs or otherwise. DRAccess reports is where your special education service providers can get those reports. The peer reference reports are only available for children with IEPs.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, because it would show then our students on an IEP where they land within their peers that are also on an IEP, and it would exclude the gen ed kiddos then.
No. So, okay, so just want to point out the peer reference report that Shawn went over, comparing to a group of all young children 0 to 5 in California, including those kids without IEPs.
Okay.
So it's actually our calibration sample. It's like 20-some thousand kids that make up those bands. So it's not their peers in their classroom.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In California.
Okay, so I was under the impression that it was showing within our direct group of kids. I didn't realize that it was a mass group.
Right.
Okay,
But
okay, then that helps.
Okay, but if you produce a group report in DRDP Online, you will have your kiddos with and without IEPs in that report. And
it'll be just special to our classroom.
That's right. That's
okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I was just trying to figure out, like, if we're giving, there's going to be a definite discrepancy between what's what. And so I wanted to know if we were able to, how it would break down differently. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Beautiful. We are going to step into linking the DRDP. So I'm going to bring us back to PowerPoint. And we're going to take a look at how you can link the DRDP assessment data and results to foundations, to curriculum, to informing instruction and the things that you do on a daily basis. So here are some possibilities, and I think we can also drop the link in to the chat box to get you to this space on our website. That might make it a little bit easier, aligning the DRDP to our foundation, to the foundations, but also thinking about curriculum and instruction. We did a little bit of that together, brainstorming on how you can link that data into planning and curriculum instruction. So using the child report, for instance, to identify the measures that you're going to focus on. There are some in the chat box also. So if you haven't taken a look at the chat box for some of those ideas, I encourage you to do that. But how you'll transfer that data to inform your interactions and the opportunities that you provide. Aligning those to the plans, aligning it to foundations to create and understand sort of the intention of that planning can be very helpful. So I'd love to open it up as well for thoughts and questions, ways that maybe, especially if some of you are already doing this, how you have found these benefits. How have you used this data for IFSP or IEP meetings? And then thinking about your family meetings. I've heard some of you speak about collaboration already, but let's get some more conversation going and some more ideas out there in terms of linking your DRDP data to these aspects. What have you already done? What are you hoping to do? And I do see in the chat box some questions around the reports accounts. For anyone who's dropped those into the chat box, if you want to reach out to us at the end, you'll see our information. You can always reach out to DRAccess and we can help guide you a little more for those specific issues. How many of you have currently taken your DRDP data and linked it to aligning it to the foundations or to support your instruction or to have collaborative meetings with families? You can feel free to come off mute or drop it in the chat box. Oh, and look at that. Elizabeth's taking care of account stuff. Oh, good. Melissa's starting to run those peer reports, right? As the students are getting ready to transition. It's a good reference, yeah, for both families and the gen ed teachers. So really helping set that next receiving teacher up for success so they can pre-plan for the children that they're going to be receiving. They'll know what types of learning opportunities could be helpful. Great. tongue-tied, DRDP data, say that 10 times real fast, can fill those little gaps in assessments, right? You're all liking those peer reference reports. Create baselines and next steps, absolutely. And if you're got some data that you can end up sharing to help inform those goals during those conversations for IFSP or IEP meetings. And as we heard, families are really interested on how their child is developing and progressing against peers. Excellent. The next question to be thinking about is how will you use the DRDP process and results to support and inform your instruction? If you already are, fabulous. I encourage you to think about how you can add to that, maybe do it a little more often or frequently throughout a day or more consistently, maybe a little more detailed in some of the ideas that we've shared. How can you take yourself to that next best level in utilizing the data to inform instruction and support the work that you do? Love to hear some ideas again around that as well. I want you to be thinking about the why of the DRDP that we talked about when we first started today. So all of that information around accountability and funding and quality care for children and families. Think about how you've already used the DRDP process to support and inform your work. And what will you do next and moving forward? And identifying areas of strength and need, absolutely. So printing those, running those reports and seeing where children in each of those domains can absolutely help guide you for where students are performing and what's next. And it's very helpful to see that current level and next level of development on that status report. Excellent. Excellent. We have just a couple minutes left. We did promise that we would have time for open questions and answers. I also would love to know, what are you still wondering about? Big key takeaways that you will be thinking about after this time? And what are you excited about implementing, trying new, or adding to your current practice? And then, as we mentioned, we're going to go ahead and drop a link for a survey. It's not going to be specific to this particular training, but just in more relation to sort of these questions. What are you still wondering about? What would be helpful to learn more about? Those kinds of things. Good. Excitement for the peer reports. The peer reports are getting a lot of airtime today. I love that. Some more helpful links in the chat box. Excellent. Any other wonderings, big key takeaways anybody would like to share? All right. Well, we are all going to say thank you very much for choosing to spend your hour with us today. We hope that you found it fruitful. If nothing else, a nice reminder of all the great work that you're doing, and hopefully you're walking away with some good nuggets of things to start to implement and incorporate in the work that you do, and you're finding it a way to support what you're doing, making your job just a little bit easier. We appreciate all that you do. Thank you for being here.
Yes, and thank you for joining us, Desired Results Access Project. There was a question in the chat in regards to us recording this session. I believe that we did, so it's very likely that we will have this posted on our website for future reference. But I think that we're likely to invite these ladies back in the fall and maybe do a repeat session if they're available, because I think with, our TK expansion and things, it might be a great idea to offer this again, as we always have new people that are responsible for, this information and this data and, providing reports to families and staff and things. So we would love to have them again.
Well, thank you, Melanie. We appreciate you having us. We'd be happy to be back. And then also you all drop the slide deck into the chat box too. So if not a full recording, the content and information is
Yes.
available for you in the chat box.
Yes, thank you.